Hi, everyone. This is Alexandra from Hear Me Roar. And today is episode 2 of Cacao Talk. Now, one second. Let me have a sip. For those of you who may be curious, today I made the cacao with a little bit of date syrup and sesame seeds. And as usual, it's absolutely delicious. Okay, so the topic for today. I was on a walk with a friend. We're training for a 5K for October. It's really fun. After we finish the run, we get to pick a pumpkin from the pumpkin patch. Super excited. But anyways, we were walking today and we obviously started talking about life and a topic came up and I kind of debated what I was going to call this episode. I was debating between we're all just children or we're all just a child inside an adult body, triggers, how to deal with triggers and so forth. And I think I decided to stick with the actual topic that we spoke about, and it was about rest. Both my friend and I are going through this period in time in our life right now, which I think it's a phase. I think life is about phases, just like there's phases in the moon and phases of the year and so forth, seasons. I think our bodies also go through phases. And I'm starting to notice that I specifically go through a phase every single month. I'm starting to notice a theme. So I'm also taking a side note that I'm going to be paying attention to that. But the theme that came up today is we're finding ourselves at this phase of the month really needing to rest, like our body's telling us that we need to rest. And lately, personal story, the last few weeks I have been like very active with my business, trying to grow and expand. And it was almost like from one day to the next, it was like, and now sleep, now rest. And that triggers a lot in me because I'm like, no, we're moving along. I'm starting to make money. I'm starting to make momentum. What do you mean rest? Like, I can't rest right now. That's not what I should be doing. And the body is just like, no, you need to rest, and I've committed, a while ago that I was kind of done with the universe. They say that basically, if we don't pay attention to the subtle signs, eventually the universe will get the message to us, right? And so a subtle little download of like, hey, Alex, it may be time to rest. And I don't listen to that, can start manifesting to bigger and bigger things. And it could lead to a physical injury that forces me to rest, right? Or an illness that forces me to rest. So a while back, I talked to my guides and I was like, okay, I promise to start paying attention to the subtle messages that you give me. And so, in the last few days, it's just been like, you need to rest. But the struggle here that I'm having is that even though consciously and logically, I can subscribe to this idea of, okay, my higher self, my guides are telling me that I need to rest. Therefore, I'm going to rest. There's this like gut wrenching feeling that I feel in my solar plexus, almost like this pit in my stomach, that I shouldn't be resting, that I should just keep going, that I should keep pushing and persevering through. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm getting mixed messages here, right? And so what do I do with that? Like, what do we do in those scenarios, right? And again, in my belief, life is all about perspective. We really get to choose how we show up, not just for the world and for friends and our clients and so forth, but how do we show up for ourselves when we're going through something like this in life, where one part of you is saying, hey, you need to rest. And it's like, okay, yes, that's a good thing for me to do right now. And another part of you is like this screaming, like I call it my inner 5-year-old, my ego, who's always afraid and scared and just needs to be reassured, that she's loved and protected, is saying, no, don't rest, And so I always take a breather back and I'm like, okay, well, what am I really committed to in life? I personally am committed to cultivating a relationship with myself that truly comes from self-love and self-acceptance. And even, I guess, even further to say is I really want to cultivate a relationship with myself where it's filled with unconditional love. And that is accepting and embracing and holding space for both the good and the bad. And I put that in quotations because that's how we categorize the world, but topic for another segment. That's just a duality, and it's not the real reality. But anyways, but we still do, right? Even though we consciously may have that understanding, we can't help but categorize things between right and wrong or good or bad, right? So lost my train of thought there for a second. It's just so much coming in. Okay, so going back. So when I find myself in this situation, I'm like, okay, how can in this moment I show self-love and self-acceptance of both of these thoughts? Because right now they are both real. They're both holding energy to how, and I don't want to say preventing, but they're both contributing to how I want to show up to this life experience that I'm having right now. So being committed to self-love and self-acceptance, I love to implement a lot of the work that is being called inner child work. A lot of my training came from Louise Hay's books, and there are other people who have talked about shadow work and inner child work. But really, the idea here is like I identify my ego. I identify those triggers and those parts of me that are trying to tell me a narrative that is like a heavier energy, an energy that doesn't really align with the divine inspiration I'm getting. I identify that as my inner child, to be honest. That's how I see those things. I identify a trigger as this part, this innocent part within me that's still holding on to a narrative, a belief, a past trauma that she hasn't had the opportunity to express, to be validated, to be acknowledged, to be loved, and then to be given permission to release that. That's how I view what we call a trigger or the ego or so forth. I literally view it as my inner child. And for whatever reason right now in my life, my inner child tends to be anywhere from 3 to 5 years old. Okay, so that's the image that I get. So what I do is I take a couple breaths and I step back and I connect to that part of my body, that knot that's in the stomach. And I say, okay, little Alex, what is going on here? What is it that you want me to be aware of and to listen to? And so, I was walking with my friend and we were talking about this, and I had already done a little bit of connection, but I was feeling too much the heaviness. I'm like, hey, why don't we go outside in nature? Just not to get too attached, right? And to the problem, but kind of step back a little bit away from it. So as we're talking and we're just kind of sharing, what that feels like. And I'm sharing kind of where the emotion is in my body, what kind of words or feelings are coming up. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, I said, my inner child thinks that it's unsafe to rest. And I was like, wow, that's insane. And that's crazy to the adult mind, but not to the inner child. So then I started going further and kind of asking that part of myself, okay, when did this narrative first begin? And it took me back to my childhood. Now, as I share this story, I am sharing that with the intent of that it's self-awareness. I do not blame my parents in any way. I actually don't. I really allow myself not to blame anybody else. So I'm sharing this story and not to blame them, right? But it's like this is my perspective as that child. So growing up, my parents had a business and I had the opportunity to work in their business with them from a young child and understand the value of working and earning money. And I think I learned a lot of valuable things with it. But pretty much for a good chunk of my childhood, I would go to work for my parents from about wake up at 3 a.m. until later on in the day, right? And for some reason, at some point, I started picking up the beliefs that it was not okay for me to say that I was tired. Like it was not okay for me to say I needed rest. It was not okay for me to say, no, I don't want to get up right now, or no, I don't want to go to work right now, or no. And it's not because my parents created an environment where it was like, you have to go to work no matter what. It actually was not that at all. And as I've gotten older, I've had some conversations with my mom, because this kind of seems to be a theme that I'm still working through and learning life lessons from. And it wasn't anything of that, but there were other life events that were going up, and again, I want to be as vulnerable as possible here and honest with you guys. And I also want to find that beautiful balance of like how much to share, because again, those stories and their narratives aren't, this is one-sided, right? But there were other life, I can say this, there were other life events going on during that phase in my life, with my parents, with my brothers, with friends and stuff, that all of a sudden it started creating like this convoluted ball of beliefs. And out of those life experiences came this deep attachment and narrative that it's not safe to rest. That when we're resting, we're lazy. When we're resting, something bad can happen. When we're resting, we're not being productive. Like all of these beliefs, we're all in this ball, and this ball of just knotted up heaviness is what's sitting in my solar plexus, is what's sitting in my gut. And it's what's screaming when I, now as an adult, am getting divine guidance of like, hey, Alex, this phase of your manifestation, it's time to rest. It's time for stillness. It's time to be in silence, and then the no thing, so that I can receive the clarity and the guidance to what steps to take next in my personal life, in my relationships, and in my business, to continue manifesting the abundance I want. So as an adult, I can see that, but as that trauma inner child, a child is holding on to those beliefs, right? So it was a really incredible walk, and I just kind of wanted to share and kind of break down a little bit about what I do, like the process that I do when I get a trigger. That's like one example of a trigger, right? Where I'm receiving guidance of, from my guides saying, hey, Alex, go ahead and do this. And I get, a logical or clear explanation of what it is. And then there's like this counter emotion that's happening. How I explained, I take a breather. I become witness, right? I give my permission to be the witness of what's going on, instead of identifying with myself, like what the emotions that are coming on. So I take a breather, I step back, and I'm the witness of what's going on. And I drop down into my body. I kind of start doing like what we call a body scan, to see where in my body am I feeling the heaviness of this, contradictory belief, or this fear, or this trigger, or this anxiety. And then I connect with it. And then I ask it, when was the first time that this started to manifest? And it takes me back to a childhood memory, or an age range. And I connect with it, and I say, okay, what do you want to share with me? And then from there, honestly, I mean, it may sound simple, but it's still, one of those things that sounds simple, but when you put it into practice, it's a little overwhelming. Most of the time, my inner child, again, just wants me to acknowledge her, wants me to validate her, wants me to say, yeah, that's heavy. That's heavy that you really wanted to stay home on a Saturday and just watch cartoons, that particular Saturday, not every Saturday. And you were afraid to express that. Like, yeah, that's heavy, and that makes sense why now that I, as the adult, am saying it's time to rest, you're getting a little overwhelmed by that. And then I kind of just sit with it. And sometimes this just takes a few moments, and other times it takes several sessions and several conversations with that inner child. But yeah, it's so empowering and so liberating, at least for me at the end of the day, because we have within ourselves the ability to receive all the guidance and clarity and healing that we are seeking outside of ourselves. It is not outside of ourselves. It's actually inside of ourselves. And it's just so empowering, so liberating, so freeing, to sit with that in those emotions. And some of the emotions are very overwhelming. There have been times where I'm in the bathtub. Water for me is a great way to just purge emotions. And all of a sudden I just start crying, and it's not even crying, it's like a sobbing. And I know that those tears have been in me for 10, 20, 30 plus years. And in those moments, there's really no need to dive deeper and understand, like, oh, what is this trigger? What, like, sometimes that's not the intent. The intent is I created the container and I opened up, and it's just purging out of me. And other times, like this situation, where there's like this contradictory belief that's saying it's not safe to rest, I was like, okay, yeah, that may need a little bit more attention and stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys, a little process, and just because that topic came up. And I hope, and I know that some of that will resonate with some of you, and hopefully some of the suggestions I give aligns with your own self-healing journey that you're on. As usual, feel free to leave a comment, questions, or any suggestions of any other topics. I can always take these topics further. Like, I literally was like, oh my God, I can go 20 different ways. And for a moment, I was going to sit down and like write this whole outline down. And that's not the purpose of Cacao Talks. The Cacao Talks, it's really an idea came in, an inspiration came in, a real life situation, right? And then I make very delicious ceremonial cacao, and then I come in front of the camera and just talk and trust that whatever comes up is what needs to come up. So that is my share for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.